Welcome, everybody. Episode number 10 of Swing State Update. I am your co-host, Austin Smith, along with joining us virtually, our COO, man in charge, Tyler Boyer. And then we also have one of our great Midwest leaders, the Midwest man from the state of Wisconsin, our regional manager, Brett Galacheski, is joining us from the great state of Wisconsin. And last but not least, we've got a very special guest with us today, the great Blake Masters. Blake, how are you?
Doing awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. We've got a lot to talk about this week. We're in episode 10. Blake Masters running for Congress. The congressional race shakeup in CD8 out in the West Valley. Debbie Lesko is retiring. We've got a good crop of candidates jumping in. A lot of different moving parts here. We've also got the Georgia debacle going on regarding removing President Trump from the ballot, trying to keep him off there. We're going to talk a lot about that with our guests. So we have a lot to cover today. But sadly, Tyler, we've got to talk about the World Series. And this is something we just got to rip the Band-Aid off and, start to heal as Arizonans. The D-backs, unfortunately, did not make it Game 5. And it's pretty sad. It's pretty depressing. It's been 20-something years, Tyler, and you were there, Tyler. Let's walk us through the D-backs a little bit.
Well, I'm going to tell you, Blake was there. Blake was at a game I saw. I was there last night, and it was heartbreaking because brought the family. We got seats right behind the pool because we wanted to make sure nobody was getting in our pool. I don't know. Did they end up jumping in our pool? I don't know. I didn't
hope
watch.
not.
I went home and just went to sleep because I had to be on an early plane to Michigan here. But I was telling my wife this whole Diamondbacks debacle kind of reminds me of the elections in Arizona, where it's like we have a new crop of young people. We had 4 23-year-olds on the D-backs starting lineup, but we have all this fresh blood that came in with no help because the Diamondbacks are so underfunded, just like Arizona. The Republican Party underfunded Arizona so significantly, and look how far they came. We didn't win a World Series, which would have been really cool if we had a few more pitchers, a little bit more money. We probably could have done it, but we had a lot to look at and say, wow, this is really cool that we have all this new talent, this fresh talent that's come into the state, and a lot to look forward to. And that's kind of the way I look as a good transition here to talking to our good friend Blake, who ran an incredible Senate campaign in this last election cycle with almost no help at all from guys like Mitch McConnell and everybody else. And it's too bad because it's like we are right there on the verge of being able to win with just a little bit more resources. And so that's the same story with the Diamondbacks. I felt the exact same way last night as I felt, this last election cycle, which is, hey, we've got a lot of great things happening, just not enough resources coming to us.
You're
That's
absolutely
really
right.
I had not thought about it that way, but when you articulate it like that does resonate. Like I just remember last night I was in a sushi restaurant in Glendale watching the game, and I thought we were going to come back, and then it just really slipped away at the end. But it's like we weren't supposed to be there. Like nobody thought that the Diamondbacks early on in the season would be there, right? Maybe some people thought we could compete for the wild card berth and whatever, but like nobody believed that those guys could get as far as they did. And so it's just hard to see your team lose, but then it's hard not to feel just damn proud of those guys, right? And
Absolutely.
They are young.
Yep.
And what do you do when you face adversity? You pick yourself up, you figure it out. You move forward, put a smile on your face, and you go and you win. And so I'm proud of those guys, and I think they'll be back. And I like the metaphor, the comparison to the elections.
Brett, and
the analogy is the same though, because you guys, nobody believed when you got in, Blake. Everyone's like, "Oh, Blake, nobody knows who he is," and you came up very quickly, very rapidly, and earned the trust and faith of a lot of Arizonans really rapidly. So that's again, I think that's it's a good sign for where I think the movement is and Arizona is right now. Looking forward to the future here. So glad that you're with us and we can talk a little bit about how your future contributions look for not just the movement, for the country.
Right. Well, Blake Masters here with us in studio. He's now running for Congress. I've known Blake for a couple years. I actually knew Blake. Let me preface this a little bit. I actually knew Blake before he got into politics. I met him. We had a conversation following each other on X. Previously was Twitter back in those days.
I still call it Twitter.
I still have the calling it Twitter. But knew Blake, started talking to Blake a couple years ago. And I'd like to say I was one of the first people he reached out to about running for U.S. Senate a couple years ago. And now he's here with us in studio running for Congress CD8. Blake, why in the world do you want to run for Congress?
Well, I really do want to serve in Congress because I know I've got a lot to contribute, right? I ran for Senate. I ran hard. Mitch McConnell, we needed the national funding. We didn't get it. That's one of the reasons why I didn't get across the finish line. But man, it's like I care about federal policy. I care about the Trump agenda. You look at what Trump ran on in 2016. It was less immigration, right? Certainly less illegal immigration, build the wall. It was better trade deals for all Americans and, free trade. Hey, it sounds good in theory. There's no such thing as free trade with China, right? And I think Trump taught a lot of us free market guys just that truth, and he got it done. And then he ran on, can we stop the mindless, intervention in other countries, right? Like Trump actually ended the war in Afghanistan. He doesn't get credit for it, but he did. And you see how quickly the world has become just dangerous and everything's on fire now that you've got Biden's foreign policy. So it's like that Trump 2016 agenda is just so beautiful. I fought hard last year to get in the Senate so I could help enact that, right? I think we got a lot of, Republicans running in this CD8 race. I wasn't expecting Congresswoman Lesko to retire. You probably weren't either.
No.
It was a big curveball, right? But I took a week. I thought hard about it, prayed on it with my family. I'm not originally from the district, of course, but we'll be moving up. I got a rental in Glendale. I know the district pretty well. I'm still learning a lot about it. But I campaigned hard there last year when I was running for Senate. And I know that when we send me to the House, I'm going to vote the right way. The constituent service is going to be off the charts. But I just think I've got something extra where I can actually help lead. And I'll join the Freedom Caucus, absolutely. And I want to help lead the Republican conference. We need to fight big tech. We need to be, awake to the rising threat that China poses. We need to stop giving Ukraine so much damn money and depleting our munitions stockpiles. And we need to increase our industrial capacity so that we can build more stuff and be safe, right? All these things I care strongly about. So I just think I'm the best candidate. And here was an opening. And I really wanted to serve in Congress. And so let's go.
Right. And I think what's so important, like this is a Republican district, the West Valley, winner take all essentially in the primary. And there's going to be a lot of people in that race. And I asked this same question to Abe Hamadeh. And, being in the state legislature and being here at Turning Point Action the last several years, and we interact with candidates that are running, and they're the most conservative person you've ever met. And then when it comes time to press the red or green button, you find out who really those people are. And so what differentiates you? Like, how are you going to prevent yourself from being like co-opted by the leadership, by lobbyists, by special interests down there? Because within just like a couple weeks, a lot of those members, they go back on their word. They get co-opted by the leadership. They get pushed around by the lobbyists. And the vast majority of Republican voters are sick and tired of that. So how do you prevent yourself from being, co-opted by leadership?
I think you can look at how I ran my 2022 Senate race. I could have chosen to do it differently. I could have sucked up to Mitch McConnell, said great things about the establishment, and, I'll vote with you, sir. I could have done that. Maybe he would have even rewarded me with funding, right? But I wasn't going to run that kind of race. I have serious problems with Mitch McConnell. I mean, it's crazy that he's been in the Senate longer than I've been alive, right? And so I'll go on record as being in favor of term limits. Like, we badly need term limits. You can't have this octogenarian class, Biden, McConnell. Like, it just doesn't work. So I'm anti-establishment. I'm clearly the guy that Mitch McConnell thought was too conservative and too independent-minded to be in the Senate. And so if Mitch McConnell doesn't want me and Chuck Schumer wants me, then I'm probably the exact guy that you want there, right? That one didn't work out. But here I'm having great conversations with, some of the best members of the House, the Freedom Caucus. Honored to get Paul Gosar's endorsement. Right. J.D. Vance. These guys know what it takes to get in and fight the establishment and fight the left. And I'm just honored to have their trust. So you know me. The short answer is you know me. You know that I'm excited to go in and change the way things are done, because business as usual has just led to this point, and I feel like we're about to lose America.
Go ahead, Tyler.
Well, Blake, on that topic too, I mean, again, not to get too poignant about this, but when Debbie first got in, and Debbie was a great, I want to just make this super clear. When I was county chairman of Maricopa County, Debbie Lesko in the state legislature was one of the only legislators who invited me down to the legislature, embraced, asked how she could help. She got in as a Tea Party leader during that Tea Party revolution into the state legislature, and then she ultimately got into Congress in a multi-way race that looks probably pretty similar to the amount of people that will be in your guys' race again. But ended up winning that thing and squeaking that thing out. But she got in as one of these people that said, I'm going to be on the Freedom Caucus. I'm going to be awesome. And over the course of the last couple of terms, has kind of distanced herself from the Freedom Caucus, ended up looking like she was just voting, almost exclusively the way that Speaker McCarthy wanted her to, and kind of lost that Freedom Caucus juice, if you will. And so much, I think that's part of the reason why she decided to ultimately retire, was because a lot of people noticed that as well. What's kind of your response to that? How are you responding to some of the people in Glendale and in that district with that kind of observation, and how you're going to be different from Debbie in that way, and a little bit more stick to the Freedom Caucus type stuff?
Well, it's an R+10 district, and you do the polling, and pretty clearly it's a Trump district. Okay, 3/4 of the likely Republican primary voters in that district love Trump, or they at least like him, right? But it's pro-Trump. I think CD8 demands America first conservative representation. I think Debbie Lesko's a fantastic congresswoman. Her constituent service is off the charts. But Tyler, I take your point, and I hear this when I talk to voters in Glendale and Peoria and Sun City West, maybe especially. They want someone who's going to go and bring the heat. They want someone who's going to not just join the Freedom Caucus and be anonymous. They want someone who's going to give them outsized representation, who's really going to lead on issues. I'll preserve anonymity here and not say who it was, but a high-ranking, very prominent member of the Freedom Caucus. I was on the phone with him last week, and he said, the most important thing when you get here, you got to be polite to your colleagues, right? Like, don't be a jerk for the sake of it. But Blake, don't be too impressed with this place. The architecture is stunning. You got the Capitol Mall. But don't be too impressed, because leadership's going to try to make deals with you. They're going to try to offer you plum committee assignments, right? They want to get you on board. Don't be too impressed. Remember why you came here. And of course, I'm going to have great mentors there. Paul Gosar's a friend. Andy Biggs is a friend. Eli Crane is a friend. And how about Eli? Eli surprised the hell out of the Washington establishment. I know some of those guys were
surprised is a different. Yep. I think might have been pissed him off.
Pissed him off. I mean, they just
he surprised me.
He seemed like such a nice guy when he was campaigning, and if you know Eli Crane, of course, he's salt of the earth. I mean, he's got the awesome Navy SEAL background, but he's just so humble and so nice, and so I mean, you could forgive him. He sounds sometimes a little moderate. I mean, he's chill. He's been shot at. He knows something about staying cool under pressure, but to the point when he got there, he just did what he said he was going to do. And immediately with the speaker fight with McCarthy back in January, he's like, hey man, nothing personal, but like my voters in Snowflake, they're not so down. So I'm not going to do it. Right. And I think Washington was very unused to dealing with that. Someone who just goes and delivers a humble sort of leader servant capacity on what they promised to do. And that's what I believe in. It's just don't tell a lie. Like it wasn't worth it in my Senate election for me to be devious or lying about it. It's just, here's what I think. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to speak the truth every day. And if Mitch McConnell doesn't like it, fine. The good news in this CD8 race is I don't need Mitch McConnell's help. Right? I'm going to go in. I'm going to bring the heat. Again, not just throwing bombs for the sake of it. I want to get stuff done. But you get stuff done not by compromising, but by bringing the Republican conference over to the right, by expanding the House Freedom Caucus's footprint. Right? You don't win by conceding to the left. You don't give an inch. You just try to do what you said you were going to do. Let's get the movement going. And I'm just optimistic about the future. I really am.
Yeah, I think go ahead, Tyler.
This is something real quick, Austin. This is something that makes Arizona really unique. And this is the reason why we have so many people call them flamethrowers in Congress compared to other states. We have what they consider a purple state, mainly because we have this really strong downtown, urban area that's been hijacked by radical Democrats. But then we have an extraordinarily conservative suburban and rural area of the state. And so that enables us to have more Freedom Caucus members per capita than any other state in the country. And that's something that we actually share pretty similarly with Georgia. Georgia has this capacity as well. And this is what's so infuriating for leadership right now. And this is actually presenting a little bit of a problem because we have to win Arizona statewide. But it's really hard when we have all of these establishment, national, what I call the apparatus, withholding support, withholding the proximity to work with guys like you or guys like Andy or guys like Eli, because they it's not a go along to get along type of a mentality from guys like Paul and others, right? Like that's not there. Kind of we need leadership right now to move past that. What is your plan or what's your kind of response to that? Like, how do you see yourself being able to be a really staunch member of the Freedom Caucus and the conservative movement and the new right, kind of like JD, but then be able to, hold people accountable to supporting states like Arizona and Georgia and Wisconsin and Ohio, the places that we need to win long term in order to win the country.
I think, it's finding the right balance. Again, you can't compromise an inch on policy. I don't believe in that. It's just death by 1,000 cuts and everything swims left. And then we end up in the situation like we are today. But I also believe in just trying to be Big Tent. Like, we do need to point out to the establishment, like, hi, we're losing. We're losing. If Republicans are just having a civil war between establishment and MAGA or, the center right and America First, however you want to cut it, we lose swing state elections. If we continue to do that, we won't win the Arizona Senate seat back. If we continue to do that, Trump won't win in Arizona. I think we can win that Senate seat back. I think Kari Lake is running a very strong campaign so far. I know Trump can win Arizona, but let's be honest, it might really be close. So we got to figure this stuff out. And, I actually believe in Reagan's 11th commandment. I have harsh words for Republicans to their face behind closed doors. But I'm not going to go out, and even if there's some establishment candidates in the CD8 race, I believe in private conversations, and I don't believe in publicly roasting them. I'm not going to publicly go and slam another fellow America First Republican. I'm just not going to do it, right? We need to work together. We need to build a strong, cohesive Republican Party. That doesn't mean move it to the center. I think it means move it to the right. But our arguments are so good, and we have the policy. Like most people in Arizona want lower taxes. Most people in Arizona want border security, right? Most people in Arizona actually at this point don't want to continue to send unlimited funding to Ukraine, right? We should support Israel and their fight against the crazy Islamic jihadis, but we shouldn't just fund this proxy war in Ukraine forever, right? Most people actually agree with us on the issues, so we got to get our own internal stuff together, and we got to fight back hard against the left. That's the real enemy here.
No, absolutely. And I think that the speakers fight, from the first speakers fight that happened in January, that was huge. That had never happened in our country's history before, because most speakers in that town were always voted in just by acclamation. They got the votes in conference. McCarthy broke his promises, and, it took a few weeks, and a lot of people, especially, most Americans could not care less. And you get a lot of talk from consultants and from the DC crowd that were like, oh, this is so bad, we can't govern. Well, it's actually showing the chaos that's actually happening in Washington, is that members are bought and paid for. They're rank and file members who actually don't rock the boat a little bit, because if you're not rocking the boat, you're not moving it. And what is so desperately needed in Washington, D.C., especially amongst conservative members, because you have, Republican members who represent very red districts that vote moderate. And that's just not acceptable. And so CD8 is a perfect example, is that Debbie Lesko, she came out strong when she first got to Congress and was voting with the Freedom Caucus, and she broke that. And you're going to start seeing now with a lot of people who are America First, Trump-endorsed candidates from the past, like yourself, get into these open seat races, and how they're going to, divide themselves up, try to figure out who's going to be the exact right person that we want to be in that position. So we got to make sure that as MAGA, constitutional conservatives, America First, whoever we are, that we are unified around one candidate. And I think, be honest with you, this CD8 race, it's going to be tough. There's going to be a few of you that have conservative bona fides that are going to be in this race. How do you set yourself apart, to ensure those people in CD8 that, Blake is the real deal? There's going to be other people who have, the resume like you do, conservative. How do you set yourself apart?
I mean, I think there's some big differences. I've succeeded very much in the private sector. I think running a business, hiring people, firing people, being responsible for payroll, all this stuff, it's really important, right? Government service can be very noble, obviously, but I think succeeding in the private sector and with my background in entrepreneurship, like I literally wrote the book on entrepreneurship, #1 best-selling book in the world. I think I know a lot about economic policy. I feel like everybody else the consequences of Biden's disastrous economic policy, but I actually can really, I think when I'm in the House, get in and help promote pro-America economic policy that's going to help fix this stuff. So I think my business background helps. There's some biographical things like that. But mainly, I think I've been tested. Like, I'm the one that drank $50 million in negative attack ads from the Dems. And here I am, still with a smile on my face, still fighting. I think a lot of people in the race haven't been tested like that. I fought probably the strongest, if not, second strongest candidate in Mark Kelly. I think he's a terrible senator. That's no surprise, but he's an astronaut. His wife was almost assassinated, and he had $100 million to come at me and define me. Right? It was a tough lift, and didn't get across the finish line first on that one. And obviously, the Maricopa machines and all that didn't help. But man, I fought hard. And I think I've been tried and tested. I'm someone McConnell doesn't want. I'm someone leadership doesn't necessarily want. And I think that that rings true. I think other people might vote the right way. Anthony Kern, I'll just say, I've had very respectful conversations with him. I think he's a true conservative. I think he's a good guy. Not sure he can raise the resources to actually keep an establishment figure like Ben Toma from winning the CD8 seat. So I think I'm the full package. I'll vote the right way. Constituent service will be off the charts. I think I have that X factor where I can go and immediately be like the most knowledgeable person in Congress about big tech and some of these modern threats that we're facing. And I think I can raise the money to actually win this thing and make sure a pro-Trump America First Republican is the next congressman from CD8.
No, and you mentioned Ben Toma. He just announced, yesterday that he was running for Congress. He's the current Arizona Speaker of the House. I serve with Speaker Toma, and I have a good working relationship with Speaker Toma. He wasn't my first vote. I voted for Joe Chaplik to be Speaker of the House just because of my relationship with Joe, and I believe he'd be the better speaker. But Ben is now running for Congress, and we have one-seat majorities in the Arizona House and in the Arizona Senate. Being Speaker of the House in Arizona, even though they only get paid $24,000 a year, it's a full-time job. And we are in a battleground state. We talk about Arizona and Georgia and Wisconsin all the time. And now Speaker Toma is going to be running for this very competitive primary seat. In my opinion, it would be respectful for him to step down as Speaker. I'm not saying he needs to leave the legislature, but step down as Speaker, because if you're going to run for Congress, that's going to take a lot of time and effort to do something like that. I would prefer that if you step down from being Speaker of the House, we've got to raise the money to keep the legislature here in Arizona. I know you've been a great supporter of conservative America First candidates for the state house. It's the most conservative legislature we've had in almost 40-something years, right, Tyler? And a lot of that is because of the resurgence of people running for those offices. And, Speaker Toma, he's not the most liked by the grassroots. And I would tell that to him in a conversation. I speak with people in the West Valley all the time. I'm from that area where our districts kind of border together, 27, 28, and 29. And if he's going to run for Congress, he needs to be dedicated to something like that, to let somebody step up and save the legislature, because we talked about it a couple weeks ago. $500,000 is going to be poured in from, the governor's own PAC, millions more, 500-something million from outside groups from California, from Hollywood, to flip the Arizona legislature. And we need a speaker to be dedicated to raising the money for that stuff. And I don't think he's able to do that as Speaker
I
of the
would agree
House.
with that. And let's lay out the stakes. We talk about flipping the legislature, keeping the legislature. What does that mean? Guys, it means the difference between Katie Hobbs actually having a governing majority and not. What we have a 2-seat majority in each chamber, right? So that's just 1 or 2 races that the Democrats need to flip. If the Democrats, God forbid, get control of the Arizona House of Representatives or the Arizona State Senate, all of a sudden you've got California, New Mexico, Illinois-style gun control, right? They're going to try to enshrine the right. I mean, this is a ballot measure, right? They're going to try to enshrine some so-called right to have unlimited abortion for any reason all the way up until the moment of birth. Taxes, we got those down to 2.5% flat tax in Arizona. The Dems want to take that to 8, 9, 10%. Soon they'd compete with California, like 13.9% marginal interest rates or something crazy. Like, Arizona will be over if we lose the state house and the state senate. And so Yeah, I mean, look, it's a free country. If Speaker Toma wants to run for Congress, go for it. I don't think he'll win. I intend to beat him. I think I'll be a better representative for CD8. But I agree with you that what he can't do if he's busy trying to raise money for himself to go to Congress is raise money to keep the state house. When you're Speaker of the House, your job is to raise gobs of money to make sure that Katie Hobbs doesn't get to basically anoint the next Speaker of the House. And so I think he can't do both, and I think he should probably have not run for Congress. But given that that's the decision he made, I think he should probably step down, let someone new, someone fresh and hungry. I'd nominate you, Austin,
No thanks.
to go be Speaker and raise money. Because I'm telling you,
No.
look, the presidency, I'm biased. The CD8 election is very
sure.
important, obviously. Senate election, very important. Trump's got to win Arizona. That's very important. Some of the most important elections in Arizona next year, though, are those state ledge races. Because if we lose control of the state house to Katie Hobbs, you can kiss this beautiful state goodbye. I truly believe that.
Brett, from an outsider's perspective looking in from Wisconsin, you're in the same situation that Arizona's in, where we've got like a divided government, a Democrat governor, and then you have a Republican legislature. You've got some members of Congress that are somewhat squishy, and then you've got some really hardcore conservatives in there. What is your perspective, Blake, from Brett from Wisconsin, looking at Arizona right now? We're kind of in the same situation, except we're in the Southwest, you're in the Midwest.
Yeah, a lot of parallels between Wisconsin and Arizona. One thing that immediately sticks out to me that we're starting to see in real time here in Wisconsin, but I know you guys have been experiencing this in Arizona for a while, is we're starting to experience the Chicago spillover into Wisconsin. I know you have started to experience and have been for a long time the California spillover. And I'm curious what kind of effect that'll have on races like Blake's, on races like, here in Wisconsin, our Senate race. Blake, one thing I absolutely love about you as a candidate is the energy that you bring to the table, and just that you're young, competent, and America first. And right now we're seeing here in Wisconsin this landscape change, that pivot to the next generation of conservative leadership. I'm 26 years old. I'm the vice chair of the Milwaukee GOP. Our chairman's 22. In Dane County, we have a 23-year-old chairman of the Republican Party in Madison there. In order for the conservative movement to survive and advance, it needs young people like you, Blake, to step up and not just join their local Republican parties, but run for local level office, run for federal office, run and have an influence in making positive change happen. So, taking all that into account, though, I just want to know from you, Blake, what makes you, being so young and America first, why is it so important that more candidates like you step up and run? Because that's one thing I'll tell you we're missing here in Wisconsin in the legislature. We're all toddlers on this podcast in comparison to the average age of an elected official in Wisconsin. Why is that so important for young, competent America first leadership to step up?
It's kind of a cliche, but it's also true. It's like the future belongs to young people, right? There's something to be said for age and experience. Like there really is, and there should be a mix. I would want to see Congress have some Generation Z, Millennials, X, Boomers, and maybe even a few side. Like it would be healthy if there was a spectrum, but of course there's not. I think the median age of a United States senator is 65. It's a little bit younger in the House, but they're still mostly all pushing 60. And things just do not work anymore. And I think young people are very hip to this, right? Look at interest rates. Look at what's happened under Biden. 3 years ago, I had a lot of friends who maybe they didn't own homes yet, but man, they were on track. And now the same exact home costs like twice as much in terms of your monthly payments because interest rates are good luck getting like an 8% mortgage. It's not quite as bad as the 70s yet, but we're getting Jimmy Carter redo here with Biden, and young people understand this. Look, I've been successful in business. I'm not going to pretend that I haven't been. So I'm not going to sob and don't pity me or something. But I know what it's like to have a mortgage. I know what it's like to I didn't have any money at all when we had our first child. I probably had $10,000 in my bank account, and net debt from law school. And so I've worked hard, I've succeeded, but I also understand, and I have a lot of friends who man, they want to have kids, but they're not quite sure they can afford it, right? This is something that baby boomers didn't quite have to deal with in the same way. And so just being young and having children and understanding the different pressures, economic, social, that comes with this, I think it's good to not just have Congress be for baby boomers only. It's time for a passing of the guard.
A retirement community.
Love retirement communities. You go and talk to these folks and they all remember a time when America worked better, right? But one of the most heartbreaking comments that I get when I go to Sun City West, talk to some of the older voters there, heard this a lot on my Senate campaign too. People would come up to me, they might be 80 years old, and they'd say, Blake, thank you for doing what you're doing. I'm glad that I'm at the end of my life, though, because it's just so heartbreaking to see what's happening to my country. And that just breaks my heart. And I refuse to let this country go down when we've got I've got kids, we have a baby being born in December. It's like, what kind of country are our kids and grandkids inheriting? And the answer is like, it's really scary if we continue on the current course.
I had a conversation a couple weeks ago with my future father-in-law, and he's blue collar Midwest guy. And at no point, he brought this up, and it's been sticking with me. At no point in American history, modern American history, has it been harder for young people to get started and harder for older folks to stop.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of it. And that is the consequences of electing people to Washington, D.C. that kick these big this stuff down the road all the time. And now we're feeling the effects of it.
Yep.
Well, Austin and Blake too. This is the one thing I've noticed. I'm glad we have Brett on with us right now because, as he mentioned, he's the first vice chair of the Milwaukee GOP. And if you go into these Republican Party meetings, and Blake's been to more than he probably realized he was getting himself into when he decided to run. And Austin, obviously, you've been doing this for a long time with us and just been involved with the party, but they just want to be able to look at a young person and say, can I trust you to hand the keys off to you? That's basically, so when we train a lot of our guys at Turning Point Action, a lot of the conversation that we have is, hey, you've got to go in and earn the trust of the older generation so they feel comfortable handing off the keys. Because, I mean, look, you look at Congress, you look at a lot of these guys who are on the younger end, which was a lot of these Gen Xers, and a lot of them aren't very good. A lot of them are pretty bad in office. And you even look at, Ben Toma is a perfect example of somebody that just you talk to Ben. And again, this isn't disparaging him in any kind of way, but you talk to Ben, you'll realize real quickly in a conversation with him, he has no idea really what's going on with the movement. He has no idea what the average voter thinks. God bless him for getting involved and running for office. I think everybody deserves a lot of respect for that. But there's an entire generational gap where there's some older baby boomers in particular who have been running the party for so long that just have trust issues because there was almost an entire generation of Republicans that came up through this through the last couple of decades in particular, who just have really taken advantage of the Republican Party and voters and so on. So, I think there's a really important aspect of that, which is you got to be able to go in, and even right now, Blake, you've got to really focus on this as you're going in and running this race. Is even though you've earned a lot of that during your Senate race, is hey, the keys have to be trusted and handed over to a younger generation who can now carry that burden moving forward of being able to stand up for what's right to an entire generation, to multiple generations. And who knows what's going to come next with whatever they're calling Generation Alpha and Beta here coming down the road, because it's a little bit scary with our kids.
Well, and to Tyler's point, and I'll just say this real quick. I mean, there are Republican leaders all over the country that preach day in and day out that they want young people to get involved until the second a young person walks into the room. Then the rhetoric changes. Then they see this generation as a threat to their power. And what we know, being the freedom fighters that we are, is that when you're complacent, you lose. And clearly what the older generations have done over the last couple decades in running the conservative movement, it's not working. And we're young. This generation was raised by mostly Reagan-era conservatives. We come to the table with new outside-the-box ideas. And it's time for that generational shift. Otherwise, I mean, we're talking about our future grandkids growing up in a socialist country. So again, I'll thank you, Blake. Being a young conservative, stepping up and running, it's just fantastic. And what a precedent that it sets to that next generation of conservative leadership.
One thing that Brett's talking about here too, and actually we've been saying, Charlie and Turning Point as a whole, the ecosystem, been saying it for quite a long time now, is that the atmosphere that you see on your college campuses today will be reflected 15, 20 years from now in the halls of Congress.
Yep.
You think, what was that congressman's name that pulled the fire alarm? Can't think of it. I don't remember his name, but that type of activity, the activities that happen on college campuses where you try to steal things off people's tables, you try to shut down events, you deface property, that type of activity that you face on college campuses now will be in Congress in 10 years from now. How do you combat stuff like that? Well, you got to elect other young people who aren't crazy communists like that. You got to get other people who know exactly what time it is. Like, this is
The
not
ones who've been
about
fighting those people.
Yeah,
The ones who've
like
been fighting those
Jamal
people right
Bowman
now.
is name.
Yep.
Jamal Bowman.
Yep.
That type of activity, most, the older guard of the Republican Party, or the Ben Toma perfect example, don't know what time it is or what is actually happening now on college campuses and the boardrooms. Will be in Congress in 10, 15 years. Now you have adamant socialists like AOC, that other gentleman from Florida, and the entire squad. That will be commonplace in Congress. And how do you combat that? You got to elect more young America First constitutional conservatives
who aren't scared, right? And this is why
Right.
I love every time Charlie goes to one of these college campuses, right? And you got all these pink-haired people. They look very upset. Usually, they just can't stand their safe space is being
Right.
violated, right? He just comes in and lays down the heat. Usually he's got security details surrounding him and all this. But it also shows the conservative kids at those schools, like, hey, you can do this. You can actually take a stand. You can stand up. There's a lot more of that. It's not like a majority, unfortunately, but like there's a lot more of them that are in that silent minority that are a little bit scared to speak out because their professors disagree with them and all this. We have to take back the colleges. We have to take back the schools. I think people are getting hip to this now. I remember when I was at Stanford, 04 to 08. I mean, the sort of mindless left-wing student body as a whole, I would say it was pretty anti-Israel. There was definitely sometimes, some overt anti-Semitism. It's probably usually more latent. People sympathize. There was a lot of both sidesism. Oh, well, Israel does this, Palestinian does this. And it was BS, of course. It didn't make sense at the time. But fast forward just 15 years, 20 years, and the rank anti-Semitism, the rank anti-Israel views that you're seeing come out of these 20-year-olds' mouths who know nothing about the world, right? They just know what their idiot professors are telling them. And it's just really dangerous. It's like we are letting a whole generation of kids get indoctrinated, and they don't stay kids forever. They become doctors and the American Psychological Association, right? It's
we
just
will have
completely woke at this point.
communist lawyers, people who grew up on or went to college campus, became a Marxist, and then ended up going to law school.
It's horrible. But the
They
thing is,
get preference.
it doesn't
Right.
work. It doesn't work. Like things will start breaking down, and we're going to see more and more of this. But I think it's why we need that new guard, right? Changing of the leadership. You get America First millennials in office, right? We don't predominate. Most millennials are communists and not America First, but you get the right ones in office to set the tone for the next generations who are going to be paying attention and watching. I think we can really make a lot of difference pretty quickly.
Let's switch gears here a little bit. Let's talk. We've talked CD8 in Arizona. Let's talk Georgia and all these other states. So recently, arguments in a lawsuit using insurrection clause to knock Trump off presidential ballots begin in states like Colorado. Here's what was reported this week. Efforts to use the U.S. Constitution insurrection clause to bar former President Donald Trump from running for the White House again entered a news phase Monday as a hearing began in the first of two states' lawsuits that could end up reaching the U.S. Supreme Court. So this whole attack to keep Trump off the ballot is not going anywhere. And example.
It's the one time the left pretends to care about the Constitution. It's when they think they've got a provision that'll keep Trump off the ballot. It's a bullshit constitutional argument. It won't pass muster. He's going to be on the ballot and he's going to win. We have to make sure of it.
And in this podcast, we talk specifically about, these three major states. We talk about all the swing states, but a lot: Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin. Just mathematically, the 270, that's what actually is going to be used to win back the White House. And they're trying to do that in Georgia because I want Tyler to talk about this a little bit more. They're attacking it with Georgia specifically because of the resources that have to be, split up amongst three states. And Georgia's right next. That's what they want, Tyler. They want to keep Trump off the ballot in Georgia so they can focus on Arizona. What do you think?
Well, let's go to clip one. I don't know if we have clip one queued up here. Let's kick to that with Trump talking a little bit about it. And then I'll kind of lean into what we're hearing on the ground, what's happening there with the Republican Party, some insider stuff here. Do we have clip one up?
A fake trial is currently taking place to try and illegally remove my name from the ballot. I often say that 2024 will be the most important election in the history of our country. The reason for that and that statement is that our country is being destroyed by people that have no idea what they're doing, or even worse, they may very well have an idea. They may hate our country, and they may want to see it destroyed. But it may also be the last election we ever have. if this election doesn't work, if this election is rigged and stolen, if bad things happen, our country will not survive. If Crooked Joe and the Democrats get away with removing my name from the ballot, then there will never be a free election in America again.
Tyler.
Yeah. So what's happening on the ground, and I can speak to this because I was an elector. So for everybody that's listening, most people have no idea about this. You have to explain this to your neighbors. When you're actually electing a president, you're actually voting for electors that are there to represent, because most state laws, your state law has in place is, hey, it's a winner take all situation, or it's a partial. Most states are winner take all, where we send electors for whoever wins the popular vote for president for the state. And that's who goes and represents you as a state to vote for president. And then once those votes are certified, those are sent to Congress, and that's what's actually read on the floor of Congress to nominate or not nominate, to elect a president. And so that we don't have a democracy when it comes to electing a president. This is what we know. Yeah, we talk about all the time. Republicans and conservatives, oftentimes talk about this, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're saying that we don't live in a democracy." Well, we don't. When it comes to electing a president, we have an electoral college, and the electoral college is who goes forward. So now it's average citizens who are electors. I was an elector. Many people were electors, and so this is where the left has moved their attacks. Now they're personally going after electors on the Republican side to try to scare them. So now in Georgia, there's this feeling that it's going to cost money, significant amount of money, to protect electors for sure. They may even put provisions in where it costs a significant amount of money to be an elector, to get on the ballot. And in Arizona, we have 11. In Georgia, I can't remember how many it is, but I think it's just a few more than that. Those individuals that's a substantial amount of risk. That's a substantial amount of money. And this is part of the way that they're trying to influence the election and keep, basically people from representing Trump on the ballot. And then in addition to this, they're trying to remove his name altogether from the ballot. So that's kind of what's going on in the background. And what we're seeing right now is a lot of the Georgia Republicans are freaking out because they're going, wait, we're not, what's going to happen? What's the next banana republic thing that's going to happen? And preventing electors from being able to get on the ballot. It's just crazy. I mean, we are living in such a completely terrible time. And so that's kind of what's going on in the background here. But it's wild. It's wild. And everybody should be completely aware of this. The problem is that it's so intricate. And these are things that have just happened automatically for years and years and years. Most average people have no idea what's going on.
Right.
And it's so anti-democratic. That's the irony of it all, is the left is always bleeding on about democracy, right? And you're right, Tyler. You very often have to correct people. Actually, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic. Okay. But they're always talking about democracy. What do they want to do, actually? Look at what they're doing. They're trying to take Trump off the ballot. They don't want voters in Georgia to have a choice to vote for President Trump, because the left is terrified that if you give voters a choice, they're going to compare Trump, who had a successful presidency, to Biden, who's absolutely just blowing it, and they're going to choose Trump. So they don't actually want democracy. Every time they say democracy, they really mean they're creeping left-wing authoritarianism. Correct. They're authoritarians, and they don't want you to have a free choice.
Well, and it's usually always the ones who they always call those of us on the right extremists or fascists. Like, well, you know who actually does that? I was like,
Freudian. It's projection.
It's projection. I was like, you guys you're the ones that are actually doing fascist stuff, like kicking people off a former president off the ballot. That's pretty fascist.
Awesome. They've gone all in on Georgia too, right? Because you have to remember, they've moved basically all their resources out of Florida. Part of the reason why Ron DeSantis did so well in Florida is not only the insurgence of Republicans in the state. That's for sure. That's certain. That's verifiable. People are attracted to conservative policies, and so they move there. But the second thing is the Democrats pulled out all of their resources out of Florida, and they repositioned them to Georgia. So they've gone all in on Arizona and Georgia and Wisconsin. And now they're freaking out because, with Kennedy on the ballot, or with West on the ballot, with all these different things messing up their projections, is this going to fail? And just like Blake said, and they have to defend Biden's record at the same time. And so is there enough money? Are there enough votes to manipulate to be able to win Georgia for them now? And now some of the question now is like, well, maybe not. And the same issue is here in Arizona for them too, is, well, maybe not, that they may not be a thing. So they have to quickly make a decision on how they're going to fund things. So this is part of the reason why you're going to see crazier and crazier stuff like what we're talking about with Georgia right now, is now they're trying to find different ways that they can try to win Georgia without having to worry about the numbers or the amount of money that they have to spend in order to win. That's why you're seeing what you're seeing here happening in real time in Georgia. And people, again, normal people don't know. They just don't know about any of this. And that is the anti-democratic thing. And it's really more than anti-democratic. It's authoritarian type activity that they're trying to take here. Is they're trying to limit the amount of options that you have on the ballot. That is Russia.
And it's
you want to talk about
Tyler,
Russia?
right?
That's one party Russia.
Yeah, and that's two things that we talk about. They're trying to remove candidates off the ballot that they don't want, but they're also making you forcing you to pick candidates and rank, like with ranked choice voting. Because if you don't rank and pick all the candidates, your vote doesn't count. It's the same exact thing. So we're gonna kick candidates off, but we're also gonna make you vote for people that you don't like. That is so undemocratic. That is so un-American.
Austin, imagine this world, right? And this is the way that the Democrats want it. If they could have their dream, it would be get into a place where it becomes normal to kick people off the ballot, right? And we have a lot of experience with this, by the way, with college campus elections. Austin got to start doing this stuff. This is exactly the playbook they use on college campuses, by the way.
Yep.
And that's another overture to like what we see on college campuses is what we end up seeing in real life. When they run for student body president, what they like to do is, do ranked choice voting, implement ranked choice voting everywhere. So then you feel like your voice is being heard, that you have many options, that all that, and then they eliminate the candidates they want off the ballot. So when they eliminate that candidate off the ballot, then they're like, oh, but you still had a second choice, you still like the libertarian kind of, right? You still like this person, right? And of course they know that person is not going to win. But there's less of a protest because there's this convoluted system that they've implemented. And that's their entire Alinskyite game plan of how they're attacking our elections is, make it seem like there's really good reasoning for what they're doing and then giving you all sorts of confusing options so that you complain less because you don't want to look like an idiot when you complain.
And we've got clip 2 here. Tim Pool brings up a really good point about playing some offense, about them trying to kick people off the ballot. Play clip 2.
I think Texas should file a lawsuit against Georgia right now to the Supreme Court, citing original jurisdiction, saying that the federal elections of 2024 are held between all states. And Georgia is removing a candidate from an election that Texas has to participate in.
That's a very good point.
Mm-hmm. Texas should sue and say they cannot interfere in the election because they are negating our votes.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. Let's roll. Come on. Where are we at? Anybody?
I don't think that's a bad idea. I mean, you got to start somewhere, because when you are taking people off the ballot, it is affecting other states. It's the same exact thing as when Maricopa County screws up on election day in Arizona, it affects all the other counties. The same thing can be applied when you kick a national candidate off the ballot. It's screwing it up in other states that actually matter, like Arizona and Wisconsin and Michigan and Nevada. And I mean, will somebody like Ken Paxton step up? I hope so. I think Ken Paxton is the guy to lead that charge, to be like, no, if you're going to take him off in there, well, why don't we just start kicking off candidates in Texas too? I mean, little eye for an eye, but I don't think that's going to be constitutional. But somebody's got to step up and do something. That's why these attorney general
idea about the lawsuit
are so important.
I hadn't thought about that, but why not? I don't know if the Supreme Court finds a way not to hear it. Right? They're pretty good at saying sometimes that's a political question.
Right?
They don't want to touch it, but why not? Because what Georgia's doing is just wrong, and I think President Trump is right when he says that if they get away with doing that, we're probably never going to have a free and fair election again.
No,
and once you lose that, as we know,
well, this is what
it's a banana republic, and we can't let it happen.
The unfortunate part is this is what they want, right? Because they want to have these situations. I think, again, this is just my speculation, but this is what I think they want to have happen. So then they have an excuse to say, see, the electoral college doesn't really work. Because if you have a candidate that gets kicked off in a state, then it messes up we totally sympathize with Republicans' concerns that, by Trump not being able to win Georgia, that automatically makes Biden the president. But look, this is the reason why the Electoral College is so bad, and we have to get rid of it. This is the argument that they're going to try to make moving forward by allowing them to manipulate these elections. And this is why every state has to be so defensive. This is why it's so irresponsible for like Raffensperger and Governor Kemp and others to not step up and wholeheartedly defend their states and the sovereignty that you have in placing names on ballots, because this is at its heart the most important thing that we have as Americans as part of this union that's really a union of sovereign states. And the moment that you have, again, just to Austin's point, a sovereign state not participating, in the same way that other states do, you're going to have a civil war here between states in particular, because there's going to be states that are going to be completely offended and completely against what those states are doing. And that's a real problem for our country moving forward. That is what is going to spur so many complications internally, that it's going to allow our enemies, foreign and domestic, to attack and weaken the United States of America. So this is all just really stupid political games being played by the left. This is all spurred by guys that we know, like Eric Holder from the Obama era. And if we do not step up and say enough is enough, this has to stop, we are going to be living through a very tumultuous time in America.
Well, what this is doing is this is creating a dangerous domino effect to other swing states. This isn't just happening in Georgia and Arizona. It's happening in Wisconsin right now. We're taking a play out of the Georgia playbook here. Last time that I was on this podcast, I talked about the Wisconsin's Elections Commission putting forth an emergency ruling to put the power in the hands of the clerks to decide which candidates get to be on the ballot or off the ballot for things like character flaws, character reasons. And while they haven't indirectly said that, this is aimed at President Trump, we all know what that means. So when you look at how the left has systematically destroyed countries that have gone full-on communism, full-on socialism, one of the things they did was target the elections. We're seeing right now in Wisconsin, in Georgia, and Arizona, this ranked choice voting wave, this uprising among even folks on our side that are all of a sudden in favor of it. It's really dangerous what is happening here. And while folks will look at things like we're talking about keeping candidates off the ballot or even ranked choice voting as a way to protect democracy, it's not that. It's uniparty BS. That's what it is.
Absolutely. There was a poll that came out a couple days ago in Georgia, the Zogby poll. President Trump, 51%, Biden, 49%. This was 628 likely voters, 273 Republicans were in that poll. So that's just, a pretty small chunk in the, with a crowded general election. So that's Trump, Biden, RFK Jr. Trump's at 45%, Biden at 36%, RFK Jr. 15%. In the presidential primary, Trump 55%. You want to take a guess who's in second place in Georgia's this last poll for the primary?
Nikki Haley?
Ron DeSantis?
DeSantis.
You want to guess how big the spread is?
Big.
45 points.
Ooh.
45 points. So here we are again in Georgia, Donald Trump dominating by double digits, almost going to be up 50% in Georgia. And we're still wasting money on this Republican primary. I like Ron DeSantis. Do I think he's the nominee? No, I'm a grassroots guy. I think it needs to be Donald Trump because we've got to set the tone here to save our country. And so Donald Trump is up 55% in a swing state. amongst likely Republican voters. It's time
And-
to clear the field, guys. Get out.
Even if you look, the argument back in January that you'd hear, February of this year was like, oh, well, yeah, Trump may be up in the primary, but like, look at the general election polls. We need someone electable. We need DeSantis, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that's not what the polling shows now. Trump is polling better now in the general election context, I think, than he was polling pretty much at any time in 2020. And 2020, of course, was officially very, very close. And unofficially, I think they did all these things to make sure that Biden got in. Trump is polling well in the general. He's polling better than DeSantis in the general. He's polling better than Nikki Haley in the general. I think he's obviously going to be our nominee, but I actually think he's the best guy to beat Biden.
Agreed.
And if it's not Biden, then it's probably not going to be Kamala because she's horrible and nobody likes her. They'll probably switch to Gavin Newsom. And I think Trump's the best one to take him on too. So it's time for the donors to get on board. It's time for people to realize, hey, this is the last shot, right? And what a comeback story it's going to be.
I was cool with the mean tweets because it kept our enemies away. Gas was $1.50. I mean,
You had some border security.
It's some
starting
border
to happen.
security. I mean, I understand that Donald Trump's not every Republican voter's cup of tea, but the country's on the line right now, and the vast majority. I mean, we talk about this all the time, Tyler. That the vast majority of Republican voters today, the party, is conservative. The moderates can't win primaries anymore. They have a harder time, getting across that finish line. The vast majority of Republican voters want America first. They want a conservative person to represent them in Congress, and we're going to start seeing that a lot more across the entirety of Republican primaries, from congressional races, running for president, running for U.S. Senate, running for legislative races. And there's that big of a spread amongst, candidates that are running. Like, you've got your conservative America, constitutionalist, America first, whatever you want to call them, then your establishment island. The vast majority of Republican primary voters are on that island. And you're starting to see that even more so with Donald Trump just running away with the Republican Party primary, and then you're having some of these guys like the DeSantises, like the Haleys, that are just kind of waiting around, hopefully that they'll catch up, but they're not even within double-digit striking range. Tyler?
Well, one of the things I disagree vehemently with Charlie and Jack lately, and you've heard some of this, we haven't really got into it in like a drag-out fight on thought crime or anything like that for those that watch that, but is that RFK Jr. Has the potential to damage Trump more than Biden, and really it doesn't matter what RFK does for the most part in most states, because he won't have enough of an impact to swing a deep red or a deep blue state. But what will have an impact is in states like Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. And part of the reason why I think that you haven't seen Democrats come out like so pumped about RFK being in the race is because of a state like Georgia. So you just put up that poll that showed RFK actually pulling more votes from Biden than he does Trump in Georgia. And a lot of people are like kind of mind blown by this, because when you think of the Kennedy family, you think of the Northeast, you think of states like New Jersey, maybe pulling more Democrats, or obviously Massachusetts and things like that than Republicans. But the reality is he's going to have a different impact in different states. And, people need to remember Georgia's a weird freaking place. Georgia's a place that voted overwhelmingly for JFK, where it was a strong Kennedy presence, and they were really excited to vote for Kennedy there. And then they turned around and voted for Barry Goldwater. And then they turned it around and rejected LBJ and voted for Nixon. And they turned around and voted for, they rejected, I'm trying to remember. They voted for Carter, obviously, when he's from there. And then they voted for Reagan. So this is not a place that is, committed to one personality or another. And there is a significant propensity for RFK to pull from a lot of Democrats in a state like Georgia and a state like Arizona. And people need to be aware of this and realize that, you might pull some Republican votes. There might be some very vocal Republicans that say, like, I don't like Trump and I'm going to vote for RFK. But this is where now you're going to start to see how this impacts and trickles down throughout the entire state, and impacts Georgia, impacts Arizona, impacts Wisconsin, and impacts these congressional races like Blake's going to be running in, and others, where now you're going to have a constant conversation about, these guys and trying to keep these guys off the ballot. That's not going to just be Trump they're trying to keep off the ballot.
Yep.
If RFK is going to damage Biden, they're going to try to keep RFK off the ballot too.
No,
Like
absolutely.
they're trying to do no labels.
Yeah, this is going to be a reoccurring thing. This is not going away anytime soon. That's why, we elect people to Congress, to your legislature, your governor, your attorney generals, that they've got to stand in this gap and have that fight, and us on the right to be just as organized and aggressive in defeating this, because it's not going to go away. It's going to affect everybody. If they're doing it to Trump, they will do it to people running for Congress that they don't like, that for people who are running for, county board of supervisors in a small little town that nobody really knows about. And so it's going to be a big deal. And that's why we need everybody's help. We need you to go to tpaction.com/get involved. Everything that we talk about on this show, it's great. We have good guests, but we need you to be in the trenches with us. We need you to be a part of this movement to save our country, because the clock is ticking. So tpaction.com/get involved. One thing we always talk about, Tyler, being precinct committeeman. You're not actually in the Republican Party unless you're a precinct committeeman. You got to go to tpaction.com/precinct. No matter which state you're in, whatever the nomenclature is, the statutorily required office that it is, precinct delegate, precinct leader, precinct committeeman, central committee member, whatever state that you're in, you may not even be in a swing state. We need you to be involved in the local Republican Party there, because we believe in a ground up approach to saving this country, not a top down, a ground up. That's why we're so focused on the grassroots. That's why this podcast is dedicated to the grassroots. tpaction.com/precinct. One of our staff members will help you, no matter where you are in the country, to get you involved to be a precinct leader, precinct committeeman. tpaction.com/chase. We're going to be chasing ballots a lot. Low propensity voters in the swing states, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, wherever you're at, we need your help. If you live in New Mexico and you want to come work for us at Turning Point Action. Come be a ballot chaser. tpaction.com/chase. Get involved there. We're starting to build our massive groundswell army for Arizona next year. We're starting right now. tpaction.com/chase. And one more thing about, what's so cool about Turning Point Action is our scorecard. We're going to have a shakeup here soon. They're going to start voting on more appropriations. But this is why the speakers fight, the first one was so important, and why this last one was so important. I think some people owe Andy Biggs and Eli Crane and Matt Gaetz an apology, because Kevin McCarthy broke his promises when it came to single subject appropriation bills. The legislatures do it across the country. We're going to start seeing that now in Congress. And Turning Point Action, we follow that stuff every single vote. Big issues, taxes and spending, border security, school choice, medical freedom, everything under the sun, American culture. We follow it at Turning Point Action, the most comprehensive scorecard in the country.
You asked me earlier, right? Like, how are you going to make sure that you stay accountable to your conservative values once you get in the House? Well, I think I had some good answers. Another answer is I want 100% on the Turning Point scorecard, because I know you will be all over me if that slips, right? But that's what we need to do. Hold your elected officials, keep them accountable, hold their feet to the fire, make them do what they say they're going to do.
tpaction.com.
Two of the only hundreds in the country are Eli Crane and Paul Gosar. Yep. Endorsed you. So
they're those are the guys. tpaction.com/scorecard. Like Blake said, we follow every member of Congress, from the patriots down to the tyrants. We're watching every single one. Blake Masters, where can everybody find you?
BlakeMasters.com. Very simple. Thank you, guys.
Tyler, you're a gentleman and scholar. Brett, thank you for being here with us. Thank you guys for episode 10. Don't be afraid to download, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Share it with everybody else. God bless.